Hurricane Helene was just some thunderstorm on the Monday before it hit the southern U.S. By Thursday, it was a Cat 1 hurricane, and within 12 hours, the hurricane had turned to a Cat 4. This is not normal. This devastation coming without enough warning or prediction is not normal. I often joke with my own mother about how ever since Greg Fisher retired from my local news, the weather people haven't ever gotten anything right. When they say it's going to rain just an inch, it doesn't rain at all. The next day they say sunny, then the next day comes, and it's overcast all day with rain randomly throughout. They say light snow at their 11 o'clock weather set, and then the following morning, you wake to an airplane sliding off the runway at RDU, and your job canceling the day because only 4 people out of a shift that normally has about 120 were able to make it in. In August 2005, I, along with countless other Americans, watched as the city of New Orleans went from a major metropolitan area to a gravesite for some 1,800 people and a sign of things to come. Yes, New Orleans is below sea level. And yes, that makes it prime real estate for flooding. But New Orleans had the levees, and New Orleans had warning. You see, Katrina made landfall first in between Miami and Fort Lauderdale as a Category 1, but then it hit the same thing which gave Helene a steroid level boost, the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf is known for many things: large oil rigs off the coast, its important role in essentially giving life to much of southern Texas, it being the point at which the Mississippi River finally meets the ocean, and many other things. And it's also where the warming of the ocean is very apparent as a result of climate change. Over the past few decades, and in 2005, the sharp rise before the storm in temperatures was considered an anomaly. It was only 0.4 degrees Celsius above the average. Only 0.4 degrees stood between the levees holding and 1,800 people dying as a city ill-prepared for the danger of Earth strengthening its natural fury as a result of our existence. Katrina took 3 days in the Gulf to reach its highest strength. Helene didn't have an anomaly. Helene, in fact, is coming at the peak of nearly 2 degrees Celsius increase in the Gulf, which has been happening since July 2014. And with no end in sight, America isn't even remotely ready for what is to come. Recording this video today feels so odd, almost bittersweet and also depressing. While I did not suffer from some survivor guilt due to Hurricane Helene, as thankfully my area of the state was hit more by rain and moderate winds that just knocked power out in some places and down trees here and there. Most of the devastation passed us as quickly as it came, lasting a few hours overnight and bringing forth a sunny morning afterwards. Commanding General Thomas Boystick of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers said in June 2021, "There's going to be a bigger Katrina. There's going to be a bigger Sandy. There's going to be a bigger Hurricane Maria. And they're going to be right around the corner." That warning showed in the past week as Helene took more than the usual suspect of states for Gulf hurricanes and beat all of them to a bloody pulp. Even now, the death toll of Helene is still something which is climbing. Entire towns and cities are either completely gone or damaged within as well as in the surrounding areas that they are currently so inaccessible only helicopter can get in and out. Look at any town now in the Appalachian area of the South and you are likely to find only water, rubble, wasteland, or human suffering and souls surviving. An entire hospital in Tennessee was forced to wait for salvation on the rooftop as the storms brought floodwaters all around them. But rescue efforts had to come essentially after the storm had passed, because at a point the water's currents were too much for rescue boats and the wind was too much for helicopters to safely attempt any type of rescue. In essence, if Helene had stayed for a few more hours, it's likely that the 54 people trapped there were to die similar deaths as many already had that day. Asheville and the surrounding areas are gone. Many people died when floodwaters reached their roofs and rescue was still unable to get them. Many died in their cars trying last minute to evacuate once it became clear Helene was not suffering the usual 70 to 75% strength decrease we normally see when a storm hits landfall. In Tennessee, a state, mind you, with no connection point to the Atlantic, Hurricane Helene was still releasing over 4 inches of rain in many parts of the state. In one instance, at a plastic plant owned by Impact Plastics Incorporated, workers were not told to evacuate. Instead, they were told that the storm was being monitored and to await further instruction. The plant reportedly sits in a low valley, and once the hurricane's rain bands and wind were within the final miles of approach, it was already too late. Survivors of the flood which impacted the area and destroyed the plant should not have been there. Those who died in the plant should not have been there. But the company leadership outside the managers weren't there. They are alive.
What would you say to the company?
Why'd you make us work that day? Why? We shouldn't have worked. We shouldn't have been there. None of us should have been there. And that's what I should have said to them. Why did you make us work when you knew you said in the statement you were monitoring it? Why did you make us stay and work?
Is there anything else that you want?
I mean, when they told us we could leave, it was just too late. I mean, there was no way out. Some people made it out with four-wheel drives, but if you didn't have four-wheel drive, or if you were stuck in that line I was stuck in, it was too late. Because, I mean, like I said, my car got washed down the river, down the road, actually, and just, they shouldn't have ever made us go into work that day. And it breaks my heart for them people that we lost. They were good. Every one of them were good people. I work with them every day, and we were like family. We cut up, we joked there. And it broke my heart to see that they died and that they didn't make it. All because of greed, I think.
They had a non-threatening choice over their heads, while the workers had to choose between their job and the possible threat to their lives. While likely no justice will come from this, I do hope that karma does its job on this. On top of the still rising death toll, the economic cost of Helene is still rising minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, and will continue to rise for weeks, months, and possibly even years. The impact will be felt all across the country. Many locations around the Gulf of Mexico and beyond sit in tatters. Atlanta, in many places, is underwater, and much of Florida's western coastline is essentially the world's largest pile of spare wood, as homes, businesses, and services sit piled miles from where they once stood, thanks to the 5-foot storm surge that hit when Helene began her rampage. Western North Carolina is inaccessible by road in enough areas to make you think it is Gaza out there. And yet, Hurricane Helene in a few months, for many Americans, will be a footnote as the next tragedy approaches or takes hold of your mind. Because we have come to accept the poor quality of our infrastructure and the fact that, as the general said earlier, there's going to be a bigger Katrina, there's going to be a bigger Sandy, there's going to be a bigger Hurricane Maria, and they're going to be right around the corner. Recently, Joe Biden's Build Back Better Act was passed, and while it was a heavily watered-down version that was passed because politics, it did have a section about infrastructure change and climate change initiatives, something which is greatly needed. America's infrastructure is essentially in the toilet. According to HowStuffWorks.com, quote, the U.S. ranked 13th out of 141 countries in overall infrastructure, but still scored perfect scores of 100 in various measures, including road connectivity, access to electricity, and the safety of its drinking water. Quality of roads got a 5.5 out of 7, end quote, which in essence sounds like a good report card. But I think if you look at things on the ground around you, then you know better. Now, infrastructure as a whole is essentially roads, bridges, tunnels, rail lines, dams, buildings, and major services like water and electricity. Infrastructure is essentially the backbone to ensuring society can function. And there are surely a million potholes in the Triangle area that composes of Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill that would say that card is wrong. You see, everything in the infrastructure framework has a lifespan and an intended purpose. For instance, dams are designed to dam up water. Duh. But they are also designed with lifespans. Now, some major dams like the Hoover Dam possibly have indefinite lifespans, given proper maintenance. But there are countless dams all across the country designed to hold back the water and allow once flood-prone areas to be inhabitable. Areas like the towns relying on the Lake Lure Dam, such as the now obliterated Chimney Rock. The dam was built in 1926 and had updates done to it in the 70s to bring it up to standard, but it didn't meet the state standards in today's time. And if it didn't meet the state standards, do you think it met federal guidelines? Even though the dam hasn't technically failed, it was overwhelmed by the rain and a release had to come, and it did as water surged over the top, turning everything in its path into mud, scrap, and nature's wrath made manifest. All of that, it's gone. There's nothing there, Mole said. Where part of the road once ran, he said, that's where the river is at now. According to Jake Mole, who was the owner of the Lake Lure Docking Company, who once saw the waters of the lake as his company's place of operation and source of living, now he is just surviving. But it wasn't just the dams that aren't prepared for the cost of climate change. Our roads aren't either. Again, according to HowStuffWorks.com, quote, and in 2021, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave the U.S. a C- for the state of infrastructure across the nation. It warned that 43% of U.S. roads and highways were in poor or mediocre condition, and that more than 46,000 of the nation's bridges were in such lousy shape that it would take another 50 years just to complete all the currently needed repairs. The levees and stormwater systems that protect many communities from flooding earned a D grade. Infrastructure being properly maintained and built to withstand any possible factor, even if it's not common, is expensive, to the tune of $1.2 trillion for the whole nation, according to a 2020 estimate. But it is more than necessary. Infrastructure covers everything you see and don't see around you. Your water lines, your power lines, if they're underground or above ground, your emergency service access, the land your home or apartment building sits on, and the foundation that it relies upon, internet lines running through the ground and across power poles, public transportation such as buses, trains, metros, and airports, even the park you visit when you need a break from the world and some peace is infrastructure. Anything not present naturally in nature and that isn't human is infrastructure. It exists because without it we'd still be burning wood in caves and fighting off lions and bears on the daily. It exists because it betters our lives even when we are stuck in deadlock traffic, as before a journey to your local village market could easily be your last. We hate major spending projects in America these days because we have been scared into thinking that the more money the government spends, the harder it will be for us to live. But the purpose of the government is to ensure that our lives can continue uninterrupted from things which we ourselves are not built to withstand. And that starts in infrastructure. That starts in ensuring dams like the one at Lake Lure can handle a foot or more of rainwater surging on it, or at the minimum has flood channels it can send excess water to, which won't affect surrounding areas, similar to those flood tunnels that are in Japan. That starts in ensuring roads are designed to allow drainage around them for water to prevent the weight of heavy water loads from breaking them apart in minutes and cutting off entire portions of populations from the outside world. It starts in ensuring that rivers and levees are properly built to handle not just surging waters, but also a rare earthquake or two. We expect these things and never think about it till the worst happens. Then questions are asked. Climate change, unlike any other conflict on the planet, is a crisis none of us will be escaping anytime soon. There is no magical solution of diplomatic channels. Climate change is going to slowly kill millions. Each approaching storm, hurricane, earthquake, heat wave, rising sea level, change in wind conditions, longer or shorter season than normal, and whatever else climate change impacts will kill us in 1,000 different ways. All across the globe, But it is hard for me to accept that in the wealthiest nation on earth, the aftermath of Hurricane Helene should be the expected norm. We owe the victims of Helene a better solution and change. The lives lost were practically all preventable if we took climate change and the fact that nature is unforgiving seriously. But we don't just owe that to them, we owe it to ourselves. Because if we don't learn the lessons, if we don't invest in cleaner energy and resource management, if we don't demand better infrastructure, if we don't change, nature will do what it always does. It will change us on its own, at the cost of millions of lives and time.